Why is it that some Christians want to believe science as opposed to the Bible?
People don't want to feel like they're left out, and so there's this attempt to mix science and a secular interpretation of science into the Bible.
But the Bible doesn't allow us to do that.
If science is properly interpreted, then the biblical account makes sense. The Bible should come first, and we should interpret the science based on the biblical account. We're out there saying to people that you can trust the Bible, and because you can trust the Bible, you can trust the gospel message that the Bible has.
Trust the God of the Bible.
Trust the God of the Bible.
Welcome to 24/6 with Mark James from Creation Ministries International. And Mark, we did promise this time we'd talk a little bit about natural selection, which I think a lot of people still don't understand the difference between natural selection and Darwinian evolution.
Yes. In fact, natural selection was first proposed by a creationist.
Oh, is that right?
Long before Darwin, actually. And yes, there is this tendency to conflate natural selection and evolution. And people say, you know, I can see how natural selection, choosing the best, what can reproduce the most, could improve
Survival
something.
of the fittest.
Survival of the fittest, yes. And people see that and they think, well, that's evolution. So we see proof of evolution all the time.
Yeah, I remember John Mackay in one of the debates that we went to, and he said the problem with evolutionists is they define evolution as change.
Yes.
So every time you see change, they go, aha, evolution. You go, well, actually, natural selection isn't evolution. It's not an adding process, it's a subtracting process.
And that's the thing, is that evolution requires things to go from less complex to more complex.
Yeah.
Actually, evolution doesn't require that, but because we are more complex than a single-celled organism, and that's where we've come from, then somehow evolution has to explain that.
Yeah. Well, I love the video, and again, it's one of the ones that you have with CMI, The Voyage That Changed the World, about Darwin. And it talked about, again, we can knock Darwin, but he wasn't stupid.
He certainly
wasn't a scientist, but he wasn't stupid. And I wonder, you know, if you look at a Galapagos tortoise, as a for instance, it has, for one of its limbs, it has a single bone, an elbow, 2 bones, a wrist, and 5 phalanges.
Yes.
And you could look at that and you could say, you know, I could see how over millions and millions of years of uniformitarianism that could evolve into a human arm.
Yes.
But if you go into the DNA and into the cell, and I think, wonder what would have happened if Darwin had had that information. Would he have still made those assumptions?
We can't answer that question. Going down that sort of track just confuses matters very much so. The issue is that people see these changes at the body parts level, and they think, yes, I can see that happening. But what they don't realise is that it actually has to be at the genetic level that it happens, because first of all, there has to be programming to make these things happen, but there also has to be a way of passing the information on from parent to child. So, and that happens in the DNA. So any of these changes that happen have to happen within the DNA. So we're not just looking at body parts. We're looking at programming.
And again, John Sanford in his book, The Genetic Entropy, he talks about that. And it's not hidden by the evolutionary talk, but it's certainly not mentioned out loud, is that the mutations are simply letters in the mitochondrial DNA, and it's the DNA self-correcting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I've got autocorrect on my text, you know, and I wish it was self-correcting. Go, no, that's not what I meant to say.
Yeah.
You should have known that. But the DNA is, so if you get a mutation, then when the DNA is passed, I go, no, that's wrong. It's supposed to be that.
Yes. And the thing is with mutations as well is mutations are like if you had a copy of a book, and when you reproduced that book, you changed a few of the letters. You didn't decide which letters, the letters were changed.
Yep.
Are those letters going to improve that book, or are they going to cause problems for that book? And more often than not, they will corrupt the information.
Yep.
They will corrupt the information. And so what evolution requires is that not only do those changes improve the book, but they improve the book significantly over time.
Yeah.
And from what we now know about DNA, and we're learning more and more about it all the time, is that it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't work.
So the only way it could have worked, and I want to talk about biblical kinds in a minute, but the only way it could have worked is by us devolving from call it a higher species, down to where we are. There is no way we could have evolved from a lower species up to where we are.
And what we see in genetics is exactly that happening. Every human generation, every new human being has between 100 and 300 extra mutations. So compared to your parents, I'm afraid to tell you, Rob, you are a mutant.
I'm a mutant.
You're a mutant.
Yeah. What's my superpower?
And when I say mutant, you're not an X-Man. You're X-Man. No. You're not getting better. Everything is devolving.
Yeah.
Everything is, there is a reduction in complexity. DNA is getting jumbled. Now, as you said before, that there are mechanisms within our DNA to fix a lot of these changes. So there's a lot of mutations that get fixed, but there are some,
still some that
get through to the next generation. There is one particular secular scientist who did some calculations and reckoned that the human species is declining in fitness by between 3 and 5% every generation. Now, if you work on that sort of basis, then we're going downhill. But if you turn it around and go backwards into history, then we're actually getting more and more fit as you go into history. Yes, which confirms the biblical account of a perfect creation that was affected by the fall.
And I believe that if you do that reversal with the number of, and I can't remember how many generations it was, but it works out at about 6,000 years. To a human being of the fitness level of 1,
depending on how on the mutation rate that you that you build into it. So again, there are assumptions based that are based on these calculations. So we can't know for certain, but certainly it can fit very easily with the biblical account, and that's what we would expect to find.
Okay, so let's go to the biblical account. One of the problems that people have is with Noah's Ark, and I love the fact that Ken Ham's done this massive lifestyle arc in America that people go,
have you been there?
No, not yet.
I have.
Oh,
and it's amazing. It really is. And he has a creation museum there as well. And they are spectacular.
But even with the size of the ark, people still go, how can you get all the different species of animals in the world on that ark? And the answer is because of natural selection. You don't have to.
You don't have to get all the species. The Bible talks about the created kinds. And what we do know from natural selection is that from one particular kind, over time, at Creation Ministries, we talk about God building into the genetics of the kind enough variability so that that kind, as it spreads out from creation, from the ark, can actually fit into different environments. So what happens effectively is you start off with the created kind, and as they move into different environments, they become slightly different. There are different parts of their DNA that become more important in certain environments, and over time, they separate far enough so that we would call them separate species.
So they diversify into the species.
Yeah, that's what happens. But if you reverse that back, it means that there doesn't need to be all these individual species on the ark, just the basic kinds. And
it's interesting that you and I are old enough to remember Lassie. Come home, Lassie.
Well, some of us are old enough to remember.
All right, I'm old enough to remember Lassie. The beautiful collie with its beautiful coat and the long, thin nose, and very, very intelligent dog. That was the whole point of Lassie, was that the collies were very intelligent. But then people started breeding them for that thin face. And if you look at collies today, they're so tight. They're worse than supermodels.
Yes.
And their brains have been compacted down, and they're nowhere near the smart dogs that they used to be. In fact, the health of them, and this is where I'm heading to, is that particularly with dogs, mongrels are the healthiest dogs.
Yes.
When you breed a particular, you say, what, do you own Alsatian? Oh, how's his hips?
Yes. Not good.
Not good, no. And it's a common fault with Alsatians because that's the breeding. They've tried to get this particular look in the dog. The end result is we've messed it with bad mutations.
And even the dog breeders now are starting to realise that they're causing their own problems because they are, with these individual breeds of dog, they're reducing the genetic pool down and down and down until all these genetic defects are starting to show themselves in the actual physical dog. So the problems in the DNA are coming out in the dog as we see the dog.
So the original, Noah wouldn't have to take 2 Alsatians and 2 collies onto the ark. He would just have to take 2 canines.
Yes.
Which could also have included the wolf and the fox and the...
Yes, and you know what? Secular scientists would tell us today that all dogs have come from one original pair of dogs.
Yep.
So again, science is catching up
but
with the biblical account.
Again, what they're trying to do, though, they're trying to use natural selection to prove evolution.
Yes.
With their little chart that goes, here's the original canine, and then it branched off into wolves and foxes and dogs, and then that branched into this and branched into that.
Yep.
See, that's evolution. You go, no, it's not evolution.
It's not evolution. And I would say to those people, put all those dogs into the wild and see which one survives. And it will be the wolf that will survive. And the dogs that we see today have almost certainly all originally come from a pair of wolf-like creatures.
Right.
So the dogs that we see today, they're great for their individual environments that they're in. And we have a snoodle. Which is a cross between a poodle and a schnauzer. And it works in our household. But if it wasn't in our household, it would not survive.
It wouldn't survive, no. You got to look after it. And let's take that to humans, because we talk about, what race are you? Are you the Maori race? Are you the African race? No, there is human race.
There is one race.
Created in Adam, through Adam and Eve, came down. We're all the same race.
Yes.
We've just diversified.
Yes.
And this is where the pigmentation comes in as well.
Yeah. We have a wonderful photograph of a family. There are twin girls.
Oh, this is the family from England?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Twin girls. One of them is very pale. One of them is very dark. They are from parents who are mid-brown. And when we show this picture to people in our talks, the light bulb goes on. People realise that there is only one human race.
Yeah.
And in fact, the difference in colour between people can be a very minor difference compared to all the other differences. People can be closer related genetically between different people groups, different coloured skin, than for other genetic features.
Ironically, Shakespeare, well, not ironically, but Shakespeare says this in The Merchant of Venice when Shylock says, "Cut me, do I not bleed?"
Yes.
I'm human just the same as you.
Yes.
The problem is, though, when we go away from the biblical account that we are all, as the Americans would say in their constitution, we are all created equal, or in the whatever the document is that they have there.
Yes.
We are all created equal, but evolution says, no. Lighter skinned people are more evolved than darker skinned people. Then we get the Aryan problem with Hitler.
Yes, and there is a double standard here, because the scientists today will tell us, oh, no, we can't, but racism is wrong. So the scientists are telling us racism is wrong. You can't distinguish between people groups. But evolution, if evolution is true, then we would expect to see these different people groups having different intelligence, having all these differences, and that there should be some that are more fit than others. So they like to have their cake and eat it, basically. They want to say, although we can't be, racism is wrong, they have no basis for saying that racism is wrong. Whereas from a biblical perspective, we are all descendants of Adam and Eve. There is only one race, so there are no differences.
And this goes to the gospel again, in that sin ended through one man. Christ, the second Adam, died for all mankind.
Yes.
He didn't just die for the Middle Eastern Jewish descendants of Abraham.
And going back to the discussion we had earlier, some of these interpretations of Genesis, they have to start having hominids before Adam who were spiritually, they weren't human. And when you start to introduce those sorts of things into try and fit that into the biblical text, all of a sudden you get this situation where, and there is one particular organization that, because of the way they interpret the time, they have people living in parts of the world that are much, much older than Adam, or their descendants are much, much older than Adam.
Yep.
So they're having to say, well, hold on a second, those people aren't from Adam. So then you start to think, well, are those people going to be saved by
Christ's death?
Yes. Yeah. So they tie themselves up in knots.
Don't think it through.
No.
All right, I wanted to look a bit at, we want to look at the gospel and how that fits in with creation and Adam and Eve next time. But also that's Jonathan Safety from CMI's got a new book out on, you can see he's excited about it already. So we want to talk about that next time. I hope you can join us. Make sure you click subscribe, click the bell and all those sorts of things, and check the link in the description.